But then I got a call from the producer, sorry your name didn't make the list for boot camp. So that rocked my world.
Did they say why?
No, they didn't say why. No, you know what? I think the excuse actually was Ruslan.
Folks that may not know a whole lot about your story.
Yeah.
I believe you got into music and signed at a relatively young age, but what was life like before that?
So I grew up singing in my granddad's church. I started singing at like 5 years old.
And this is in Memphis?
In Memphis, okay. Yep. North Memphis, actually. So yeah, man, they would just randomly call people up to sing songs, and I was 5, and they asked me to come sing a song. And
were you good?
No, 5 years old.
Is there any video?
I think there's like a old tape of it somewhere, but like I remixed the ABC song.
Okay.
But they heard like a little bit of like tone in my voice, and they were like, "Oh, she might have something," you know. So my Aunt Carolyn would always have me up to sing every Sunday, and that's when I started getting better at singing. And then, of course, my mom, she's freaking out that I can sing, so she was telling all of my teachers that I could sing. And so I was just in choir like from literally elementary on up to 12th grade. But yeah, I grew up singing in the church, singing at revivals all the time. And feeling like the presence of God, like knowing that was a real thing. And I think if there were ever a point of like wrestling with my faith, I'd go back to those moments of like, I know that God is real. Like I've seen him, I've felt him, you know, and not like forced stuff either, like not trying to feel him.
Yeah, not trying to sauce up the keys on the piano and create the vibe,
like
but just
undeniable, you know, like, man, I don't feel like being here. I got school tomorrow, you know, and then feeling the presence of God, you know. So yeah, I grew up in that, yeah.
So how does that gift then transition into a career? How does that 5-year-old who's on stage singing her version of the ABCs with a little bit of tone then grow to all of this?
Well, I became very ambitious, so I was just always auditioning for a bunch of stuff. So like X Factor, The Voice, American Idol, local community plays. Just I wanted to be a part of all the things.
How old are you at this point?
I was probably a teenager around this time, so 15, 16. And so I think the first show I auditioned for, was X Factor, and then I made it in front of the judges. And I got like 3 yeses, 1 no. Simon Cowell did not like me. Oh. Yeah, which I was like, okay, fine, that's okay.
Yeah, he has some interesting taste in general, though.
Yeah, I was 14. He goes, you know, that was very juvenile. And I was like, well, I mean, I am 14, you know, but okay, whatever. And so I was supposed to make it to like the next like Hollywood round.
Sure.
But then I got a call from the producer, sorry your name didn't make the list for boot camp. So that rocked my world.
Did they say why?
No, they didn't say why. I no, you know what? I think the excuse actually was we have too many people or something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I was like, he just didn't like me because Simon didn't like me, you know.
And you're 14, 15 at this point?
I was 14 at that time. 14, yeah.
So you're auditioning for one of the biggest shows in the world. And Simon tells you no and calls you juvenile. Is there footage of this or no?
I don't know that there's footage of that. Okay. The only shot I saw of me was like standing side stage during someone else's audition. Okay. Because this was in front of like a live audience, so it was so funny. And then I was like, well, I'm just gonna keep going. And so then I auditioned for American Idol. Didn't make that because the lady who was running like the local auditions for that wanted me to be a part of her musical that she was doing in Memphis.
The finesse.
Yeah, so I ended up in Camp Rock the musical, and that was so much fun. Like one of like the best experiences of my life. Being around a bunch of theater kids was so awesome. And then I auditioned for The Voice, got flown out to LA for that. Didn't make that, but a producer from there reached out to me because he was now working for American Idol. And then I made it to like top 48 with American Idol. Okay. Yeah, and I was around 19 maybe when that happened, 18 or 19.
So you said ambitious, and I'm writing a book on godly ambition.
Yeah,
because I think it's so important, and I think there's a war on ambition right now for people who are creative, for people who are industrious, for people that just want to make the most of their time, talent, and treasure on this side of eternity. But there's also a darkness to ambition.
Yeah, and
sometimes that darkness, you use that as fuel.
Yeah.
So in your journey, as you're getting these no's from the biggest shows, the most linear shows, right, in terms of having as much of a top of funnel, massive platform as quickly as possible, those would be the routes, right? Because I'm assuming this is before the days of TikTok and before the days of virality. So in that process, did you end up using some of that rejection and that shame and that juvenile and those no's as fuel to like, I'm about to show y'all?
Dude, I wish I could say I did. I did not. Like, American Idol's crushed me for about 2 months. I was really questioning what was next in life, which is funny to think about. I was like 19. I'm like, girl, you got your whole life ahead of you. Like, stop it. But man, just it crushed me. And I think that's when the Lord allowed me, just like softened my heart to just live with open hands now. And I had a moment where I was just like, Lord, whatever your will is for my life, that's what I want.
Did you go on there as a Christian artist? I'm unapologetic for Jesus, or were you kind of going on there as I'm going to be a mainstream artist who's a Christian? And there's no judgment on either one.
No, for sure.
But in hindsight, at the time, what was your heart back then?
So at the time, I was pretty plugged into church and pretty excited about being a worship artist, actually, at the time. So when he reached out to me, I was like, hey, I'm not really into pop music anymore. I'm not going to sing anything like negative. So I don't know where you guys are right now with the show, with all of that. But I'm like trying to be extremely intentional about what it is I'm singing. So I was wanting to do worship music at the time.
Okay. Okay.
But he was like, you don't have to sing anything you don't want to sing, But,
okay.
Yeah.
And so what did that opportunity then evolve into?
That, I think that led me to that posture of heart with the Lord of let your will be done in my life. And my manager and I, Jill, both decided, it's best to just live with open hands. And so whatever door he opens, that's the door we want. Whatever door he shuts, we don't want to walk through that. We're good, And then my manager, I remember we were in a hotel and she looks at me and she goes, we need to get you on TobyMac's team. And I was like, okay. I didn't really know Toby well because I was mostly familiar with gospel music at the time. And just now starting to figure out who Hillsong was. So Toby wasn't on my radar. And I was like, sure, if you're like, why not, And she had remembered just working with his team when they came to our church like years ago, like observing his merch team. And felt like it was a reflection of leadership, And so, she made the right call. We knew someone who knew his manager, and he connected us to Toby's manager, and Toby's manager brought us out to Nashville, and I wrote a lot that week, But yeah, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So one, you're suffering in that moment, right? You're disappointed, and obviously it's not to the degree of some of the other stuff that people have gone through, but to you, that's a real pain.
Real moment,
That leads you to a place of just brokenness and just, God, whatever you want, do what you will with this. And then the creative ideas of Jill to say, hey, like this would be a good fit.
Yes.
Right? And then having the resources and the ability to track down someone and get you in the room.
Yep.
Because it's one thing to have the idea. It's another thing to be connected enough to get you in the room.
Right. Right. It's wild. And another crazy thing is 3 years before I was signed, I went to sing at a French church. And there was this guy who had a prophetic gifting there. And after I sang, he came up to me and he goes, in 3 years, you're going to sign a record deal. And I was like on the nose, in 3 years. 3 years.
Wow.
And so I looked at my dad. I was like, is he a real prophet? Like, is he telling the truth? Because at the time I was like in The Voice's process, and I wanted to be on The Voice. And so if I'm going to sign in 3 years, that means I'm not going to make it on The Voice. And so as a kid, that's where my immature, mind was going. And then sure enough, man, 3 years later, I signed that record deal at Goatee, which is why. And so I immediately thought of him, and I was like, Dad, do you have Prophet Mike's info? Because this actually came to pass, So
were you still a teenager when
I
you
was
signed?
still a teenager. Well, no, not a teenager when I signed. I was a teenager when that happened. I think I was about 20 or 21.
Okay.
When I signed,
So I mean, you're still super, super duper young and early in the process. Wow. That's interesting. Got that prophetic word, huh?
Dude, yeah. It was wild. I was like, oh my goodness. I checked the date. I was like, wow, 3 years. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. And it seems like Goatee and Toby have done a really good job with how they've allowed you to express yourself and blossom.
Yes, which is so helpful. I think they do a really good job, I think, with whatever artist they sign and helping them just blossom in their sound and the thing that they're passionate about. So I'm blessed to be on that.
According to the Bible, that prayer is extremely important in terms of us being transformed from the inside out when we get aligned with God's will. For the Christians watching this channel, I want you guys to implement these spiritual disciplines in your day-to-day life. And the only way I've been able to do this consistently is through writing down my prayers in a prayer journal that does a few things. One, it allows me to reflect and come to God humbly and ask him to move on my behalf. And two, it allows me to document my prayers, which ultimately help me remember the very things that I was praying for and see the hand of God tangibly in my life when he answers them. So I would urge you, consider writing down your prayers. It could be in a blank notebook. It could even be on your phone. Or you could check out the one I personally designed and used for my own quiet time and spiritual discipline that I think will be a huge blessing. It's the exact structure and system that I've used for years to pray and be more consistent in my spiritual disciplines. You can pick yours up today by clicking the link in the pinned comment below. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.